Coming up next on Insights on PBS Hawaii, Election 2014 ballot measures. Aloha and welcome to Insights on PBS Hawaii. I'm Mahealani Richardson, your host for tonight's show. In less than 2 weeks, Hawaii voters will decide who will represent us in Washington, the state capitol, in local counties, and in the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. Also on the general election ballot will be constitutional amendment and county charter amendment questions that Hawaii voters will be asked to weigh in on. One initiative that has received a lot of attention would allow the use of taxpayer dollars to fund private preschools. We'll talk with representatives from both sides of the argument. And then midway through the show, we'll bring on two experts who've looked at other ballot initiatives facing voters: a temporary moratorium on GMO farming in Maui County, raising the mandatory retirement age for judges, issuing special purpose revenue bonds for farmers, and disclosing judicial nominee names. We invite you to join our conversation by calling, emailing, or tweeting your questions and comments. Tonight, the seating arrangement and order of the questions was determined by random draw. And now on to our panel. Joan Lewis is the Vice President of the Hawaii State Teachers Association. As a teacher, she helped build the Ho'ola Leadership Academy at Kapolei High School. The Teachers Union has formed a separate committee for the future of our keiki to advocate against public funding of private preschools. Deborah Zysman is the Executive Director of the Good Beginnings Alliance, a children's policy nonprofit organization. Good Beginnings is leading the public campaign Vote Yes on 4 to push for the passage of the ballot initiative. And thank you to you both for coming tonight.
Good evening.
Thank you.
Joan, why don't I start off with you? You know, no one's arguing against preschool or the value of preschool, so why is HSTA against this measure?
Two of the most fundamental reasons, because we're teachers, we care very deeply about the Constitution. And the Hawaii State Constitution, at the onset of us becoming a state, really was a commitment to public education for all students. And we believe that at the preschool level, that should be no different. So when you talk about the possibility of opening up the Constitution, it needs to have been done after a great deal of discussion and thoughtful investigation, and certainly having exhausted every other method for reaching the goal that you want. And in the case of public preschool, in the case of quality preschool, that hasn't been the case. We believe public education is the best avenue for providing not just K-12 education, but pre-K education as well.
What would be the harm, let's say, if this measure was passed?
Well, given that there are really no plans, it's all very vague, probably one of the greatest harms would be that there's a possibility that the state would be putting up money that could be used elsewhere, particularly in the Department of Education, into nothingness. We don't know where it would go. We don't know what the limitations would be. We don't know what would be the actual outcome. There are a lot of possibilities, but as there's no plan, as there's nothing definitive, we think that what will happen is it will not reach the goal that is being proclaimed, that it will be preschool for all. It would be actually the opposite.
And Deborah, what do you say about that? And is there a plan after, if it is indeed passed?
Well, I'll begin with saying that we put this question on the ballot 2 years ago. So we've been having extensive debate now for several years about the merits of a variety of programs, as well as the question that we'll be looking at on the ballot. So this is not new. We have known about this for quite some time now, and it's been debated in many forums. And there is a very solid plan that we're looking at as well. So we know exactly what we're talking about. We can take a look at the legislation that was put in place last year, that the education leadership in both the House and Senate moved ahead, and it ended in conference committee because they said now we need to wait to see if the people vote yes. But the bill is there, so there is an implementation plan for how this would all roll out.
What about in terms of those funds? I mean, what can you guarantee? Let's say the measure did pass, that, that public schools or these private preschools in, let's say, Waianae versus East Honolulu would receive the same type of funding?
I was going to say, first, I'm so glad to hear Joan say that we are all in agreement that early education is critical. We are one of the last states in the nation to be taking a look at early education for all of our kids. So this is imperative that we start to address this now. We have 40 states that have publicly funded preschool in place. So it's time we begin. The measure that we've been taking a look at starts with our lowest income students. That has always been the priority, taking a look at how we serve low income, middle income, and how we start scaling and growing. No one believes that we'll be able to go from sort of nothing to a Cadillac model all at once. It would be wonderful, but difficult to do. It's not what's happened in the other states. So what we want to do is to be able to use all of our channels. Build within DOE where we're able to. We started this fall, so we now have 18 classrooms on DOE campuses in Title I schools serving those kids. Those classrooms are full, and I've heard most have wait lists, which is great. We also feel we need to build in our community-based sector as well. That's what's happened in all of the rest of the states, to build where we have infrastructure, where we have high-quality early educators, and use all of our options available to us to start layering and building as we go along.
Let's talk about junior kindergarten. And Joan, where does HSTA stand on that in this whole equation?
Well, the junior kindergarten model that was actually in place and was sunsetted is one of the reasons why we believe that we can actually have pre-K in the public schools. We have the infrastructure in place, we have the early educators available, we have what we need to do that and to expand it within the public school system. So why go elsewhere? Why start moving our monies into the private system? Because the challenge with the private system, every private school becomes a matter of limitations in terms of numbers, limitations in terms of who gets in and who doesn't get in, limitations in terms of who gets to stay in and who doesn't stay in. And one of the things that is not really being talked about is it's not just about the preschool itself. If you're talking about your neediest communities, you're also talking about things like transportation, you're talking about meals. All of these can be done within the communities using our public school system.
What about the cost issue for all of this?
And that's the interesting thing. When you talk about where the cost is, we've looked at a range of the cost for preschool in this state, and it goes upwards to $15,000. We believe that we've demonstrated that we can provide quality education at much less cost. And I know the challenge is being raised, what about the price of the educators? We argue that we can make sure that they are licensed, we can make sure that they are well trained, and we can make sure that one of the things that happens is for these people who work in a field that is with our most precious cargo, a quality living wage can be earned, which is not necessarily the case when you talk about the full range of preschools that are out there.
You know, Deborah, you've heard many people weigh in on this issue, and cost is always a concern.
Sure.
And a lot of people say, yes, you know, preschool education is valuable for our young people, but can the state truly afford this?
My answer always is we can't afford not to, and I think that's where HSTA and Good Beginnings Alliance agree, that we must start now. We need early education. We are failing our children, and I know that as a teacher, Joan knows that if our children start receiving early education, they will be better prepared when they get to the DOE, that we won't have the same issues that we're having now, especially in some of our highest need communities. So I did want to clarify that when we are talking about private education, what we mean here is nonprofits in the community. So I think there's some misperceptions about what we're talking about. It's very clear in the statute that's been put forward that it's nonprofits who'd be eligible for contracting. So we're talking about nonprofit community-based preschools that have been in existence for quite some time. Things like Punana Leo, things like Rainbow Preschools, KCAA, many of whom are accredited. We have over 100 accredited preschools that meet the gold standard. And I just recently was talking to all of our gubernatorial candidates, all of whom mentioned how important the nonprofit sector is, because they all said the nonprofit sector can serve the community in culturally appropriate ways, in more flexible ways, more family-friendly ways sometimes. oftentimes than the state can. I think this is one of those examples, again, where we need both. We want to grow on DOE campuses where we have infrastructure, but we also have, for example, partners in development serving homeless children at a homeless shelter, running a preschool out in Waianae. Those programs are really important. We have culturally appropriate in language-based programs. We need all of those pieces. And we also need what are called family-child interactive programs where the moms, the dads, the grandparents, tutu goes with the child and is learning. And those programs, generally speaking, are much cheaper. So when we start talking about cost, costs have been also penciled out by the state. So there's a few different options. Unfortunately, the most expensive route to go is if we have to build things entirely within Department of Education. The least expensive price tag is if we can go with this flexible blended model, where we are utilizing the infrastructure we already have, and we're building new. And unfortunately, we don't have classroom space in many DOE campuses. So on top of the operating costs, we would have to be building new classrooms, putting up portables, things of that sort. It makes it quite cost prohibitive.
Let me turn over to Joan, and you know, you've been on the front line of education. You talk to many educators who deal with kindergartners on the first day of school. So what are they noticing? Are they prepared for kindergarten? I know this is a general question.
And it's amazing that the answer is already there. Yes, those that have access to preschool, those that come from communities that can afford preschool, you can see that their readiness level at the kindergarten age is right there. And so the problem is, why is it that, you know, you're talking about families, and in some cases, if I was just speaking to a teacher on Moloka'i today, 3 children that'll have to go to preschool at $700 a month per student. Why are we talking about that level of tuition for anyone? And again, it's even if we talk about $125 million a year, that's not going to cover the full cost of tuition at any preschool for any significant number of students, especially since there were already 6,000 being served in the public schools under the Junior K model. There were another 6,000 being served when we had kindergarten, but we didn't cap the kindergarten. So we've just put into the pool of students needing preschool another 12,000 students unnecessarily. They were being served in the public schools. We need to go in the other direction, making it much more accessible to all, not just at the neediest level, but for all, so that if people are going to choose a private preschool the same way they would choose a private K-12 school, it's a choice, not out of necessity. And that's really what the core of this is.
You know, Deborah, it sounds like we go back to this over and over again, that there will be a disparity. There could be a disparity if this measure is passed. That's what Joan is saying.
Well, I'm going to argue that there's a huge disparity right now. So right now, what we have is this enormous gap. We have almost half of our kids start kindergarten with no preschool. And what we see right now is that the children who do receive early education tend to be in wealthier communities. The parents who can afford it send their children. All parents, though, when I'm out in the community, and I'm a mom myself, when I talk to parents, all parents understand the value of early education. They want it. So unfortunately, if we don't pass this measure, though, we're left with the status quo. We're left with this huge disparity that we have in place right now, where our children, we have this gap where the wealthy are getting preschool, and then those who can't afford it, sorry, too bad. So unfortunately, we need this measure so that we can start implementing and making it more affordable for all of our families.
You know, I asked Joan earlier what would be the harm if this measure was to pass. Well, what would be the harm if this measure doesn't pass?
If it doesn't pass, it's the status quo. A no vote or a blank vote leaves us with exactly as we have now. It doesn't build anything new, and I think in many ways it sends a message that early education is not important, that the community doesn't want it, and it closes a lot of doors. What we want is to start building, right, in all those pieces. So it closes doors. We will not be able to do Head Start expansion. We'll not be able to expand on the Tutu and Me programs. We'll not be able to expand in our community-based preschools. And it leaves us only with the potential possibility to expand it within the DOE, which is difficult because we don't necessarily have infrastructure in all of our communities.
You know, Vivian in Kailua wants to know about Kamehameha Schools giving quite a large sum of money to promote this initiative. And what did that mean for HSTA, for an incredibly large organization, a powerful organization to support this initiative?
I think, and it's not just Kamehameha Schools, it's all of the people that are joining in on this. And I will tell you in all sincerity, one of our concerns is with the price tag being at $125 million a year, with the game plan being rather ambiguous at this point, we're very concerned that what we're looking at is another way where we're going to take state funds and move them into a pot that the private sector can grab into, but that it's going to end up being, frankly, a boondoggle, not necessarily something that's going to serve the means that the ends that we're striving for. Private schools, private organizations don't answer to the public the same way the public schools do. The scrutiny that public schools receive is much greater than any private school just by the nature of it being public. That's what matters. And if we're talking, I don't think a no vote means we don't care about early education. I think what a no vote means, particularly with all the dialogue we're going on now, is the idea that no, we're saying these are the only answers because these are the only answers we're looking at. If we commit to the public schools, if we commit to our communities, if we make sure that that's the goal that we set, there are programs already in place, great public-private partnerships, including actually Kamehameha Schools. They were in many locations that were serving utilizing public, not necessarily funds, but certainly facilities. And those partnerships, I think, can continue. The idea that we limit that we say we must go private in order for us to expand, I think that's just saying, let's not worry about everybody.
Deborah, what about the issue of accountability and if the measure were to pass? Accreditation, standards, what would be the process for that? So
the plan is, and there is a clear plan in place, that the state, and it would be under the Department of Education and the Executive Office on Early Learning, would be able to then contract with licensed community-based preschools, and the state would set those strict standards for quality. That's very important to everyone at the table. The whole idea of this is to have high-quality early education in place. I want to come back to the costs, though, because the $125 million number keeps getting thrown around. The state has estimated that to do this contracting model, to work with the infrastructure we have in our community preschools, that to serve 80% of our 4-year-olds in the year before kindergarten would cost between $40 and $50 million. The expensive price tag, the $125 million, is if we have to serve the same number of children only in DOE, plus they've estimated almost $200 million in infrastructure to put portables up for classroom expansion. So the most expensive route is if we have to build only in DOE. Using the public-private partnership model, which is what most states are now doing, I should say all of the states are now doing, is substantially cheaper and more flexible. So again, we're using DOE classrooms sometimes, we're using community-based providers as well.
You know, Peter on the North Shore wants to know, is there any evidence, for example, a 4th grader who went to preschool has any advantage over another 4th grader who didn't go to preschool? Deborah?
There is tons, and I think Joan could answer that as well. The research is very clear at this point in time that high-quality early education does make a difference. We see students performing better on standardized testing, higher graduation rates, even things like lower incarceration down the line. So that's very clear, and other states and some of the large municipalities get it, that we need a solid foundation for our kids. If we're sending them to kindergarten without that foundation, that we're trying to kind of build on quicksand, and it's difficult for those children to ever catch up if they haven't had those formative experiences.
Joan, why don't you weigh in on this from your perspective on the front line?
Obviously, we need to do a lot of intervention. So what will happen is the teachers will do what they need to do to make sure that they're, and frankly, they will be playing catch up. But they'd be playing catch up even if this particular measure passes, but the preschools are not available to the students. That's actually the concern that we have. We may say that they'll be in the communities, but there's no guarantee that they'll be in the communities. We may say that there'll be enough to service the communities that they're in, but if they're not and the students have to go somewhere else, if you're talking about the neediest families, again, if it's not in the community, if there's not the transportation that's dealt with, and I get that if it's the most expensive model, it's going to be coming out of the public schools, because the public schools will provide the complete wraparound services, not just the tuition-based services. And that is probably the biggest thing that no one is talking about. We're not just talking about what it costs to go to preschool. You're talking about all the ancillary costs, which public schools take on a regular basis. And that means that we make sure we provide everything that our students need. And I agree, if we can move to a real universal preschool model, again, in the public schools, it is very likely that we can remove some of the intervention services that have to be, in terms of costs, we can remove those because we are taking care of a lot of the issues on the front end. But where we can ensure that that's going to happen, really giving everybody the even playing field, is in our public schools.
Deborah, can you weigh in on that in terms of the other costs that Joan is talking about?
Again, I go back to that we need to utilize all our options available to us. That's what every other state that is implementing publicly funded preschool has done. That's even what the National Education Association, the NEA, has realized is necessary. That in the early years, they've said the mixed delivery system, using community-based programs and DOE programs, is the logical foundation for universal preschool. Again, because I think that many of our community-based nonprofits do help with things like the wraparound programs. They can be, I think, sometimes even more responsive to family needs, you know, to go out and serve homeless communities, to serve people in community, culturally appropriate, those types of things. So again, I think it's about having options. We need to start now. We've been having this debate for years now. So to say that we're just beginning this debate and is ludicrous. We've been talking about it. There is a plan on the table, and we can begin today. We can start serving children today and build forward.
I'm going to go back to the junior kindergarten issue, and this is from Joan via email. You know, if the state wanted to educate more young students and receive an early education, why was junior kindergarten eliminated? Go ahead, Deborah.
Okay. Well, junior kindergarten, unfortunately, was not ever well funded. I think Joan would agree. It was an unfunded mandate, which was one of the issues we're trying to rectify. And it also, unfortunately, in most of the schools where it was implemented, it ended up being young children just in a regular kindergarten classroom. It was not implemented as a pre-K program. So that's what we're trying to implement now, is a pre-K program that is just those younger children, not just young children in a kindergarten classroom. So again, we are building. Good Beginnings Alliance was in fighting last year for the $3 million to start the pilot preschool programs on DOE campuses. We hope that HSTA will stand with us and be there fighting for additional resources to open more preschools on our campuses. We've been fighting to try to get federal money into the state for preschool. But again, we think we need to use all the channels, because different parts of our state, different families, different options are going to work better for different
Joan,
groups.
you know, there were a lot of parents who were panicking when junior kindergarten was eliminated.
Absolutely. And one of the things that we tried to do was stop the sunset. What we tried to do when they passed the mandatory kindergarten law this school year was make sure that anybody that was turning 5, following the actual kindergarten standards that they had before, age standards before, were allowed to come to school. So we've been trying to make sure that the access has been there for everyone. Unfortunately, not everybody's seeing it that way. And when Deborah talks about the unfunded mandates and the underfunding, we think this is just going to exacerbate that problem. Because when we start saying, well, we can do it in other ways, then what we're not looking at is the way that is actually the most equitable. Because it would be the most equitable to ensure that whether a family was needing pre-K in Kahala or a pre-K in Ka'u, the public school system has a responsibility to provide for that. And the one thing that sets Hawaii off from every other state, we have it in our Constitution, and not many states do. The expectation that we will make sure that every child has access to education, and that's public education. And it's one of the reasons why public education is one of the biggest investments the state makes with its tax dollars, because that was the commitment that was made when we became a state, carrying on a commitment that the Hawaiian Kingdom had right from the very beginning. So what we're looking at is, yes, NEA might say that that's a model, the mixed model happens, But they're not advocating that in every case. They're advocating that in those places where it's not feasible in any other way. And they have very set criteria for that. If we really are talking about expanding something from where we are right now, again, before we open the Constitution, why not use what we already have in place and really focus on our public schools?
Deborah, I'm going to argue that we've had that option on the table for forever then. So we've been talking about the importance of early education now for 20 years. We've not been able to build it up within DOE. I think for a variety of reasons. There's a lot of issues in DOE, and there's not necessarily infrastructure, and DOE has many things that they're working on. So it has not happened. I don't know what has changed to make us think that it can possibly happen now. And my concern is if we don't pass this measure to start looking at other models, we'll be back here again 20 years from now still saying, well, why don't we build it within DOE? Wouldn't that be nice? So again, I think we have options right now. We can do what the other 40 states have done and use our community-based preschools, use what we have, use infrastructure we have. And we need to start now and not continue saying we wish that DOE would build it, because they haven't been able to do so up until this point.
You know, Gwen in Waikele brings up an interesting question. She says that people have said we are failing our children. So who's the we? Is it parents? Is it teachers? Is it government? Who's we?
I think it's the collective we, the society, right? If we know that early education is imperative and that it is the foundation that sets our children up for success in the DOE, for success in life, and yet we are choosing still as a state not to fund early education, then I think it's the collective we.
John, do you think that we are failing our children?
You know, I think that when we try to find answers that are what we think easy, you know, no-brainer kind of answers, that's where we fail our students. And whether that's in thinking that standardized tests will make them better, whether that's going to a model that is supposedly cheaper for preschool is going to make it better, these easy answers, I think, are ultimately what fail them. If we as a society believe that early education is a right for every child, then that means that we as a society need to commit to that. And that means not underfunding. That means not letting somebody off the hook. That means not saying that if your department can't do it, you can't do it. That's the we, and I think that's what's being referred to. We as a society need to put the pressure on.
You know, looking at from the parents' perspective, and even from the kindergarten teacher's perspective, when that child enters kindergarten the first day, what should they know? You know,
probably the most important thing that they ought to know is how to socialize with other children. That is probably the single most important thing they need to know. In terms of, you know, should they know their numbers, should they know their colors? Yes, all those basic things that, you know, we get on Sesame Street, thank you PBS. Those are all great to know, but the idea of knowing how to socialize with other children and being able to work in collaboration with others, I know that sounds crazy for a kindergarten student, but that's probably the biggest skill for kindergarten teachers. If they can have that, the kindergarten teachers can take them anywhere they need them to go.
And is preschool the only means to be socialized? Can they get it from other ways?
Not necessarily, I mean, no, preschool is not, because obviously there are many stories of kupuna who take very good care of their children. Many of our retired teachers are probably, you know, you talk about preschool, bar none. But that's, when you talk about the access to preschool, what that means, it just levels the playing field for everyone.
Deborah, what should they know? What should these kids know?
I agree with Joan, but you know, I'm a mom of 2 young kids, and you know, you're a mom, and I think you and I can probably attest that preschool does bring great value. I know there are things that my son in a quality accredited preschool program has learned that even as an educated mom, kids don't come with a manual, and I think you get high quality early educators, they know how to help children with the social skills. So we do have a kindergarten readiness assessment of what kids are supposed to know, and it is things like, can they follow basic classroom instructions? Can they share? Do they have some basic pre-literacy, like can they identify a few letters? Do they know how to correctly hold a pencil? Basic things. We're not talking about calculus, but if you take a look at the data from our kindergarten teachers in DOE, it's pretty appalling. How many of our children are not ready still, how many children fail that pretty basic test, and it tracks very accurately with children who've received early education do fine on that assessment when they enter kindergarten. Children who have not generally don't.
Well, clearly both of you care very much about our children here in the state of Hawaii, and I wanted to thank both of you for joining us tonight. It's been a very spirited discussion and very interesting choice for our voters coming up in a couple of weeks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, coming up, we'll have a discussion about 5 statewide ballot measures and what a yes or no vote might mean for voters. Right now, please enjoy this story about how Hikino, this nation's first statewide student news network, is teaching Hawaii students a new literacy, giving them the skills needed for our digital world.
We wanted to make an effective and measurable difference in advancing education.
We ought to teach kids how to do news, how to do stories. Hikino as a program has grown tremendously since its inception.
Digital technologies aren't just fun and games. They're the new literacy. And combined with 21st century skills such as collaboration and oral and written communications, critical thinking, this creates a better workforce.
When students work in a Hikino environment, they build these skills.
But Hikino has to be integrated into the school curriculum for it to have a future.
The Stupski Family Fund of the Hawaii Community Foundation will make it possible for us to develop a curriculum that will allow the DOE to embed Hikino as an elective.
With this new literacy, I think Hawaii can be leading the nation.
If you set the standards high for the kids, they'll meet them.
Back against the Maui.
Every Thursday night, Hikino, which precedes Insights, presents stories told by Hawaii students about the communities in which they live. Now, should the mandatory retirement age of state judges and justices be raised from 70 to 80? Should the cultivation of reproduction of genetically engineered organisms within the county of Maui be temporarily banned? And should all types of agricultural lands receive assistance from revenue bonds? These and other questions will be facing voters statewide. What are the pros and cons on these ballot issues? John Hart, is the chairman of the Department of Communication at the Hawaii Pacific University, whose specialties include local and national elections. And Janet Mason is a member of the League of Women Voters and a contributor to Honolulu Civil Beat, an online news outlet. And I wanted to thank you both for joining us tonight for talking about these ballot initiatives, because a lot of voters and non-voters, we get bombarded with the messages, and sometimes people are making decisions in the ballot booth, which is not really a good thing. So John, why don't you weigh in on what we just heard about the preschool initiative? What did you make of the conversation?
Well, you know, first of all, it's important to remember that there is another side of the ballot. We all get engrossed in the personalities and who's running for what office. There's another side of the ballot. Some people don't even flip it over and fill it out. So it's great to think about these amendments that are very important. In terms of this question, question number 4 on the statewide ballot, I think it is the most controversial. It's the one that the public opinion polls are most divided on. The latest data we have is the Merriman data that talks about 45% oppose, 40% support. So we're within the margin of error. However, remember, if you don't mark your ballot, it tends to be viewed as a no vote. So if you've got something this close and it stays this close, the data would seem to indicate it's probably headed for defeat.
What about let's talk about that preschool initiative, since we just came out of that, Janet. And, you know, people are still undecided, so what can they do?
Well, I want to mention now that the League of Women Voters has had a voter service project. We have done a pro and con analysis of each of the state ballot measures and provided a little factual background. We did this by collecting testimony and the committee reports on each of the questions, and it's available on our website. So if people feel like they need to study a little bit before they get into the ballot booth with all these questions, it's available to the general public, and we hope it'll be helpful.
So what are some of the pros and cons of the Universal Preschool Initiative? We heard from HSTA, and then we heard from Good Beginnings Alliance.
I thought both sides did a very good job of articulating their vision for what they want preschool to be like in the future. And obviously, they're both interested in promoting preschool for all of Hawaii's children. The difference, I think, is that the supporters believe that having a private arrangement for providing preschool is the first step in building this system, whereas the opponents, they think that there's already an existing structure within the Department of Education, particularly one that provides meals and transportation and the auxiliary services, and that we should build on that. So that seems to be the nature of the two arguments we're hearing. However, I want to point out that the question on the ballot is really pretty narrow. The question is not about choosing between these two visions, really. It's about, do we want to put public money into a private system? Do we want to permit privatization of preschools? That's the question.
And John, are you surprised by the level of funding that both sides are getting from various groups?
Well, it's kind of a shame that our children's future has been politicized. And I think in this case, you can argue that there are groups with other agendas that are weighing in on this. We do have to look at this in the scope of many other things. But there is... What
are the other agendas? I'm curious from your perspective.
You have things that are present that are not said, like teachers' unions of public schools who have their own reasons not to be happy with this. You have concerns about separations of church and state, which hover around but no one mentions. You have concerns about, is this a precursor to a voucher system that hovers around and no one mentions? It would be nice if we could have these just laid out in the public debate. There is no question of the importance of early childhood education. I would love to say it's me as a college professor. In reality, the data on this is extremely clear about most development takes place by 5. Hawaii is way behind on this. We were way behind on mandating kindergarten. Most other states, I believe all 49, have some form of support for preschool. We are the last ones. If it was universal public preschool, I'd be in favor of that. But since we obviously are not going to have it, I think a private system is something that ought to be considered.
And do you think that that's the way, if you were to make a prediction, do you think that's the way we would go in terms of approving the measure?
Well, like I said before, given the data, if I had to go to Vegas, I don't think it looks good. I really hate to be talking about that before the elections because it gets some people not to vote because my side's losing, or some people to not vote because my side's winning. If you feel compelled about this issue, and you should vote and not worry about my prediction as not what the horse race is going to be.
Janet, do you hear that people are not going to get involved if such and such is leading and such is behind, or the ballot initiative is behind or going forward, that they just won't participate?
No, I don't hear that. On this one, what I do hear, and frankly, the League has not taken a position on this question, because though we have a long-term position supporting early education for children at risk, we don't have a position on privatization of public education. And for whatever reason, the legislature was reluctant to pass the enabling legislation, which normally would accompany a proposal like this. So we don't think there's enough information out there approved by the legislature. We don't know what people do not know what they're voting on, because the legislature has not approved an implementation plan for the private preschool effort, and they haven't approved a budget.
So if someone goes into the booth and leaves it blank, what does that mean?
All right. These ballot measures have what's called a double majority standard. I think the easiest way to understand it is with an example. Say there are 300,000 voters who come out November 4th. But only 250,000 of them vote on question number 4, the preschool initiative. And then say 150,000 of those 250 vote yes, the measure would not pass anyway, because the test for whether it was a majority of people casting ballots as well as a majority of people voting on the measure was not satisfied. If 300,000 people were voting, 150,001 would need to vote yes on the measure. So it's kind of a stricter test than a simple majority.
Let's talk about the temporary moratorium on GMOs on Maui in terms of that initiative. John, also heavily funded from at least one side, and then you have more grassroots on the other side. Where do you see this going?
Well, you're absolutely right. We're talking about a PAC that came in with a $500,000. That's more than several of our gubernatorial candidates have in its entirety, all dealing with one county amendment, okay? I think a couple really interesting things here to note. Number one is it's a fairly strict bill. We've had things on Kauai, which has more support for anti-GMO legislation that have not passed. We have limited things on the Big Island. It would be doubtful, I think, to see this passing on Maui, especially with the absolutely huge amount of money that's being spent to block it. But another thing of interest, that is, there is a ag constitutional amendment statewide. And I'm finding a lot of people on Oahu who are confused. They think question number 2 relating to ag expenses is the GMO initiative. So I think we're going to see a lot of people going into the ballot and voting on question number 2, not based on question number 2, but voting for or against the Maui County initiative, which is not the same as the statewide ag bill.
That's really interesting that you bring that up, because we're seeing statewide commercials that are really targeted for Maui voters.
That's right.
On the GMO issue, but everyone is seeing it. So
That's right.
let's talk about that. What is the ag measure? What does it mean, and how is it different, let's say, from what Maui County voters will be looking at?
Oh, our statewide measure? Well, the statewide measure talks about how bonds can be used for investments in non-ag lands for ag use. It's a very specific investment type of bill. It has nothing to do with GMOs at all. It's very different. But because it says agriculture and people are seeing statewide ads about vote yes on this, vote no, I think the average voter is going to have a huge problem differentiating these ads on the Maui County referendum on agriculture versus the statewide question on agriculture. And I will think it will contribute to the defeat of question number 2 statewide.
That's really interesting. Janet, so what are the pros and cons just for the ag measure that statewide will be looking at this?
The ag measure is going to permit entities that are broad, not just those on supporting important agricultural lands. It's going to permit other kinds of agricultural entities to get access to these special purpose revenue bonds. So, for instance, aquaculture type operations. Right now, they can't tap into the existing special purpose revenue bond fund because they don't support important agricultural lands. They're aquaculture.
So who defines what important is?
Oh, all right. There's a definition in the program of what important agricultural lands are. It's those that are capable of producing sustained high yields, those that contribute to the state's economic base, and those that are needed to promote the expansion of agricultural activities. So it's kind of a small piece of the pie. Smaller farm operations wouldn't always have access to the existing bond fund with this restriction that it be put on important agricultural lands. So certainly we've seen a need throughout the farming community to have less expensive capital available to start up or expand operations. Other supporters say this is actually going to help make our local food less expensive. And the opponents say something like, well, this program isn't going to be limited to small farmers, so big ag can also access the funds, and this is just going to aggravate the competitive advantage that the larger ag businesses have. So that's what is going on.
Let's go back to the GMO issue, and for some, the GMO issue is maybe not as important as the pesticide and herbicide issue. So John, do you think that people will be confused by that as well?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I think, you know, as you say, more people than want to admit it, we know from data, wait till they go into the booth to make that decision. Having been a polling official, I can tell you, having listened to the conversations that happen in there, although I don't get to see how they vote. And absolutely, and when you have this kind of overlap on legislation, bleed through is absolutely inevitable. Usually on these constitutional amendments, believe it or not, they pass. We've had 40 of them since 92. 30 of the 40 have passed. So you have about a 75% success rate. So one would presume, in the lack of other data, an amendment will pass. However, this year is very unique because we have confusing ag bills. We have a early childhood bill that's very controversial, and we have 2 bills up that are second time arounds, meaning they have been up in the recent past, been defeated, and are coming back again. So whether or not time has changed. So if we're going to have a year where amendments don't pass, this looks like the year.
Let's talk, go ahead, Jenny.
And we also have more proposals than usual.
We normally have 4, this year we have 5.
That's a lot more to study if you're a voter, I must say.
If you're a Maui voter, you're going to have your work cut out for you because you have the 5 state proposals and you have the 3 additional constitutional amendments for Maui County.
Let's talk about raising the retirement age for judges from 70 to 80. What are the pros and cons, Janet, on that issue?
The pros and cons are rather straightforward compared to the other ballot measures. Supporters will say there are many qualified jurists out there in the community, and that if we don't take advantage of their experience and wisdom after the age of 70, we're foregoing a good community resource. Other people who support this idea say that the idea that somebody is, not productive after the age of 70, that's just out of date, that many people continue to be very active, and that decisions about how long someone serves on the bench should be based on performance, not on age per se. And here I should mention that the League of Women Voters, we did testify in support of this measure, and our basic premise was that introducing that this would promote having a really good pool of judges.
John, can you weigh in on that? It's hard because you're dealing with age, and that is a very sticky issue. Yeah. With a lot of people.
I think to take age out of it, a lot of people who oppose this are in favor of judicial churn. In other words, it's not how old they are, it's let's have other people in the system, let's give different people a chance to do this job. This was a proposal that was defeated by a huge margin in 2006 or 2008, I believe. Yeah, 2006, it lost 58 to 35. The Merriman data we have from this year says people are against it 61 to 25. So this appears to be a non-starter. It's not going to pass.
Interesting. And it might come up again then if what you're saying is going to happen.
Absolutely.
Interesting. What about we have another judicial measure in terms of, releasing the judicial nominees, the names. I mean, there's an issue of secrecy here.
Yeah, this one is exactly the opposite in terms of support, in terms of rationale. This is a transparency issue. The Judicial Selection Commission actually already does it as a practice. So all the question would do is make procedure law. So I think there's absolutely a huge presumption in favor. And again, if you look at the public data, an even larger margin that oppose the judicial age question agree with this. The Merriman data says 70% to 13, which is stunning. I don't see any way this one's going to lose.
Interesting. Janet, before you go into the pros and cons of this one, how does the League of Women Voters get its information for all sides of the issue?
Basically, we compile the pro and con statements from the testimony on the bills, and we would also look at the committee reports. And so in all of the proposals, in our analysis, we found both pros and cons, and we've tried to lay them out as fairly and objectively as we could.
So it's not necessarily approved by either side
No,
in terms
it is
of your
not
guide.
approved by either side.
And do you ever get complaints?
Oh, certainly, you know, but we can live with that. This matter on the judicial disclosure, there are pros and cons to that. And as John mentioned, since 2011, the practice of the Judicial Selection Commission has been to release the names at the same time that they go to the governor's office. The situation with our judicial nominees is kind of a process problem. Typically, the legislature wouldn't get the names of nominees until the third month of a 4-month legislative session. And so the Senate is hard-pressed to consider anybody except the nominee provided by the governor unless they're aware of who all the other nominees are. So the League, again, full disclosure, the League testified in support of this measure because we think it's in the public interest and will inspire more confidence in the judiciary.
Mm-hmm. John, I get the sense you want to weigh in a little more on this.
No, I think this is probably the least controversial of the questions statewide. It's something we're already doing. We're just making it law. The vast majority want this. This is the 116 round.
Mm-hmm. Let's go back to something that more controversial, back to the GMOs. And Alan from Alewa Heights wants more clarification. What would a no vote mean on the GMO issue, on the GMO measure?
A no vote would mean that you do not support a moratorium on using genetically modified organisms in cultivation or propagation in the county of Maui. That's what it means.
And can you equate a blank vote to a no vote?
Again, let's see. It works against passage of the measure. Let's put it that way. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, you can argue it's not a one-to-one, but no matter how you do the calculus, you need 50% plus 1 of the majority. So anyone that does not vote on an issue that leaves it blank, that's 1 vote not going towards that. So I would argue functionally not to vote on a statewide question is functionally a vote against it.
Mm-hmm. John, do you think there are going to be any surprises in terms of the ballot measures?
I think the one I find most interesting in terms of can it pass or not is number 5. Dams and reservoirs, which we haven't talked about yet. This was something that was up fairly recently. It was up in 2012. So it's interesting to see that it's back quickly. And it was defeated
Can
in...
you explain what the measure is?
Oh, sure.
What does it mean?
It talks about whether or not bonds can be used by private parties to rebuild dams, basically. A lot of our dams come to us from the sugar times. They haven't been maintained. There are accidents, and that is why I think it has a chance of passing this time, even though it only failed 2 years ago. And that's because of the Pfluger case in Kauai. It got a lot of publicity. It was a dam that wasn't maintained. Bad things happened. It was a very high-profile case. So normally you would say this is back up too quickly unless you have a variable. In this case, I would argue the Pfluger case is a variable, and you could see this flipping in 2 years, which is highly unusual for a constitutional amendment. But if you wanted to say, what's the surprise, I would argue it might be this one.
And it's interesting, you know, the election is coming up and the Pfluger case has just come to an end now, all
That's
of
right.
these
So
years
that's
later.
why you've got perfect timing here. People have seen this, they saw it. I think there's a public opinion against Pfluger, regardless of what you think about the case. That's where most people seem to feel to be going, and I could see that translating in the ballot box to pass question 5.
What about the pros and cons, just in general, Janet, in terms of the
one
dam
interesting
reservoir?
aspect of this is that 2 years ago, people may have misinterpreted this ballot measure and thought it was a subsidy, a direct subsidy to private landowners. It's not. It's a program that would establish loans for the private dam or reservoir operators, so the loans would have to be repaid. It's a very interesting situation because really surface water, it's held in public trust for the citizens of Hawaii, and yet we are putting effectively management of this public asset is in the hands of private owners. So, perhaps we should step forward in the interest of public safety. That's what proponents would argue, and take care of the situation. The other thing that has happened since 2006, when the Coloco Dam accident occurred, is that the state stepped forward and they greatly improved the safety standards for the dams and reservoirs. However, we have a situation where the owners aren't meeting the safety standards, so we have a compliance problem, and maybe it's time to break that logjam, if you will.
We have one more question from Akasha from the Big Island, and Akasha wants to know, who wrote the Maui GMO bill and what's their purpose? Can either of you answer that?
I don't know who exactly wrote it, but here's something very interesting. It was a voter-initiated measure.
That's right.
And people fought very hard to get this measure on the ballot. And up until September, there were arguments about the title of the bill and the wording of the bill. Lawsuits about this until...
Janet, we are out of time, and I wish we could have more discussion. Wait, I did want to say, Mari from Manoa said, we wish this program aired earlier for those who had already voted. But John and Janet, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We really appreciate your insights.
Thank you.
Well, the general election is right around the corner, and for our final Election 2014 show, we'll be bringing you the candidates for Maui Mayor, incumbent Alan Arakawa and challenger Tamara Pelton. Then we'll have the candidates vying to represent the communities of Waikele, Kunia, and Mililani in Senate District 18. Democratic incumbent Michelle Kidani, Republican Dennis Cam, and Libertarian Wayman Banda. That's next week on Insights. I'm Mahealani Richardson. Ahui ho.